Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Bob Kincaid, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution and Civic Responsibility. It's turned out to be a beautiful day here in Appalachia. I hope the day is beautiful where you are as well. For me, the day becomes beautiful when we go on the air here because I just absolutely love this. That's a little bit play on words, but actually it's very, very sincere, and I mean that very much. It's a wonderful day. I look forward to being here at the Virtual Center and looking at some of these things. I'm a little bit hesitant, optimistic and hesitant at the same time about today's program because I have an idea and I think I know where I'd like to go, but I'm not really sure whether in fact it's going to be it's going to come out the way I'd hope. But hey, what the heck? That's kind of what makes this really interesting. And to be very honest with you, I think the program is one. It's one that I look forward to because I think it's a very, very important issue, and hopefully it will work. But first, let me welcome you to the program and thank you for your willingness to give us a portion of your valuable time in order to tune in to the Virtual Center. If you're tuning in live, or whether in fact you'll be listening later on some sort of a rebroadcast, we welcome you to the program. We thank you. Invite your input, invite your suggestions, your comments, your ideas, your recommendations, or whatever. Once again, let me share with you that our phone situation is, I was going to say is a little bit iffy. It's more than iffy. It's down as a result of a power surge the other day. So your ability to call is not there. But again, I do welcome your input and your comments on email. I look forward to hearing from you. I'll do the very best I can to respond to the issues you raise, either on the air or in a reply email to you, or indeed both. Because I really do respect the time it takes to sit down and put your ideas down in print. And I know that if you're inclined to do that, it's because you feel that you have something to say. And I look at every one of the emails I receive with that in mind. I really believe that the time put into it is worth at least that much time from my end in reading and reacting to it. And I try to commit myself to following through on that. My email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien, BRIEN 906@gmail.com. Very interesting. As I've mentioned numerous times, I am teaching a class, a university class in American history, and we have just concluded in that course looking at World War I and the conclusions of World War I and the significance of World War I, and moving into the 1920s, and which we kind of did today, you know, what I'm looking forward to in the next couple of classes is an examination of the origins of the Depression, the fall of the market in October of 1929. And the depression which followed, and some of the issues which seemingly have caused it, you know, I really believe that this is significant because I think that we came very close to experiencing the Great Recession again just a couple of years ago in what we call the Great Recession, and again, I believe that what makes the 1929 market crash and the depression which followed worthy of such attention and such you know, examination, scholarship, and conversation is the fact that this is not by any means the first recession in American history. In fact, one of the one of the major themes of American history once you turn into the 19th century and capitalism begins to really emerge in America. You begin to see this cycle of slowdown, economic slowdowns and recessions throughout. And many of us can remember in our books, although we can't remember the details that much, but we remember things like the panic of 1893, the panic of 73, the post-war recession in the Confederation period, and the fact that the economy turned really sour in the mid-1780s, 85, 86, and 87. So the economic circumstances which were happening in America during the time that the Constitutional Convention was meeting fit very well into the atmosphere that the Federalists were trying to create in America. And so it's very interesting. In fact, one of the more interesting, often overlooked parts of the very famous New Nationalism speech of Theodore Roosevelt in 1910 was his comment about the fact that the American economy seems susceptible to these economic downturns and slowdowns, much more so than in other Western capitalist economies. And of course, Roosevelt's whole idea was that his theme was in that speech was the fact that many of the problems we were experiencing in America were due to the power and the influence and the wealth and control over the economy exercised by American corporations. And his whole New Nationalism approach was to basically construct a mechanism or a strategy whereby government regulation of the economy, and specifically government regulation of corporate behavior in America, could ultimately relieve a lot of the stress on the American economy and could go a long way towards relieving some of the worst aspects of these slowdowns and these so-called economic crises that seem to be more periodic in America than they were anywhere else. And of course, one of his, the underlying theme here, although he doesn't mention it, but it's kind of inferred, is that in European capitalist nations during this period, government was exercising a lot more control over the economy. It was managing and directing and leading these nations and these economies much more actively than was happening in the United States. In fact, what his whole progressive agenda is about is beginning moving, rapidly into the progressive agenda of much more visible, much more active, much more assertive and aggressive government behavior in terms of regulating the economy and managing corporate behavior and those kinds of things. And so his argument is that one of the positive outcomes for countries other than the United States that do manage their economies much more actively than we manage ours at that time is the fact that their economies don't seem as susceptible to economic downturns and slowdowns as do ours. And his point is that this is in large part, the reasons for this in large part rest on the lack of control and lack of regulation of corporate behavior in America. And of course, the fact of the matter is if corporations are making all the decisions and they really don't have any accountability anywhere other than the bottom line and their own profit, their own degree of profit, then obviously they're going to take what they need off the top first before anybody else gets anything. So in a sense, corporations, Roosevelt is implying, take care of themselves first. And the consequence of that is that the rest of the society is reaping the results, of that kind of me first, selfish corporate behavior in America, which his whole program is designed to do something about. So anyway, I think it's these issues are quite important, but one of the things I wanted to mention was that in our last class, that what we were talking about was the predictive capabilities for the rest of the 20th century of what we learn as we look at Wilson's post-war peace program and all the rest of it. In other words, the predictive capacity that one is able to develop once one understands the ingredients of Wilson's scheme, of Wilson's strategy, if you will, for making World War I the war to end all wars. you can begin to see that America's commitment to the open door and the idea of maintaining a relative balance of power in the world. And what that means is making sure that no one nation or group of nations becomes too powerful, too aggressive, because in a sense what that does is to jeopardize the balance which it must be there in order for the open door to function. And so America's strategy in the world is, in terms of crises that emerge in the world, is always going to be, at least in part, explained by one's understanding of the open door. And so we were talking, as we did here yesterday, about Vietnam and about incursions in Latin America and various other places. In other words, you can almost guess as to which direction America is going to go, foreign policy-wise, once you understand these basic concepts. So, and I think in our class we were kind of speculating and kind of roaming through the later 20th century, looking for of how, in fact, this indeed did seem to work. So again, I think this is all very important. The issue that I would like to address today is one that I think is critical. But on the other hand, I think there's a realistic, down-to-earth, very, very familiar side to it that all of us can relate to. And it basically deals an awful lot with contemporary behavior, individual behavior, and group behavior in today's contemporary society. And let me share with you the fact that there was an editorial in the op-ed page in the New York Times this weekend, the latest article in a series called The Stone, which looks at philosophy, at issues addressed in various aspects and at various periods by philosophers. And this particular issue looked at efforts by human beings in a rapidly changing, technologically advancing society, which to many people seems to be leaving most of us as individuals behind. We've talked in recent programs about the digital age and about the technological transformations associated with the internet and with the ability to control and manage and synthesize data, and the extent to which our data is being relieved, is being released by us, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. But the fact of the matter is, most of what is important about all of us is available to other people for their own purposes, whether it's corporate interests, whether it's government, the NSA's program of recording and accessing cell phone calls and emails and all the rest of it. And we've talked about the threats, the ideas related to the threats to privacy and all the rest of it. One of the issues that really kind of seems to be at the core of a lot of this is what this is doing to us psychologically as human beings. In other words, do we begin to feel increasingly unimportant and insignificant in the world in which we live? Things seem to be going on around us that don't seem to have much to do with us as individuals. Many of us begin to get a sense that things around us would go on the way they're happening, whether we were here or not. And this, in many, many cases, has the potential of doing psychological damage to people. Very honestly, without going into any data, because I don't have any numbers here, but I would suggest to you could collect data and probably find some pretty back this up. But I would venture to guess that there are an awful lot of well-heeled people today who are in some sort of counseling. And I don't just mean drug counseling. I mean psychological counseling. Because there are a lot of people that are really having problems adjusting with what's happening in today's world, the world around them. And, you know, I mean, we have obviously a society with, depending on people's income levels, they respond in different ways. I used to facetiously say this in class one time. It always got a laugh from students. But I always used to say one time, the people who can afford it are going to a shrink. The people who can't are stopping each night on the way home and buying at least one or two six-packs. But the fact of the matter is, all of us, in our own way, one way or another, are dealing with our own insignificance in a world which seems to be less and less dependent upon us. More specifically, a world in which we seem to matter less and less. And there's absolutely no question that we see a lot of examples of people struggling to try to basically make the case that they do matter, or in order to find ways that they do matter. It's all around us. It's everywhere. One example that, that I think every one of us can relate to are the absolutely unconscionably high, obscene salaries that we see and hear about in professional athletics today. It used to be that the superstars got the big money, and everybody else, of course, I mean, being in professional athletics, being paid to play games is kind of a dream life for most people. I mean, I still hear people all the time talking about the greatest job in the whole world would be to be on the pro tour in golf, professional golf, on the professional golfing tour. Traveling around, staying in the best places in the country clubs, practicing on some of the best courses in the world and all of these things, and getting paid for it, potentially. And, what a wonderful life that would be. But we also hear some absolutely, exorbitant salaries. I mean, we're talking about people that are signing multi-year contracts for tens of millions of dollars, $20 million a year, $150 million over 5 or 7 years, these kinds of things. And most of us realize that there's no way in the world that we could even consciously spend that kind of money. And we speculate as to why people seem to need more and more and more. Why do professional athletes jump teams from one team to another? And what we begin to realize is that once you're into this kind of, you're functioning at this kind of an income level, the amount of money that you need to survive or to get along or to pay for what you need it ceases to be relevant. And really, the salary that you make becomes more symbolic than meaningful, because it symbolizes your worth in a competitive world. And so in theory, it becomes a lot more important to you to have a contract that's larger than your most immediate competitors, not because any of you need the extra money or anything. It has nothing to do with that. It's a question of symbolizing your significance and your importance and the impact. In other words, all of us want to make tracks in the world. All of us want to make the biggest tracks in the world that we can that's possible. And increasingly, in a lot of areas, the way you basically measure those tracks is in dollars, is in income. And so basically, people set out to secure as large a chunk of that recognition as they can. I mean, and I don't think I'm saying anything that none of us really know. And the fact of the matter is there's something very, very substantive and very philosophically important about this. And there was an article in the Times this week, the latest edition, the latest article in the series entitled The Stone, which addresses this very matter. And when I read it, I thought this is at least one program at the Virtual Center. I printed it and I brought it to my senior citizens class on Tuesday, because one of the realities is that when you're dealing with a group of seniors, and I'm talking about seniors, I'm a senior, but I'm not as senior as these other seniors are. I have a woman in my class that's 97, for example, and she's absolutely wonderful. But the point is that most of the people in my class are in at least their late 70s, most likely early or mid 80s, some of them beyond that. And one of the realities, of course, that we all need to face is that as we get older, our worth, the degree to which we really matter, becomes something that we think about more and more all the time, because it's clear to most of us that we don't have that much time to do anything about it. We're pretty much at a point in our lives where we're going to have to adjust and live with what's already happened, because most of us can't accomplish any more. I know I've done an awful lot of self-examination in my own case. And, you know, I get advice from people that care about me, family members and things. And, you know, for example, one of the comments I got one time is that, you know, and I made a comment in the course of conversation that you seem to be having an awful lot of fun, an awful good time. And the response I got is, it's retirement. You ought to try it sometime. And, of course, what that was a kind of a gentle jab suggesting that I'm kind of maintaining a schedule which hardly is consistent with the fact that, at least in terms of income and job, my job situation, I have retired. But in terms of the work I do and the things I take on, I really haven't retired at all. My schedule hasn't really changed all that much. And part of it, and I've reflected a lot on this. I'm doing an awful lot of self-reflection. And there's no question that part of it is the fact that I'm really afraid to stop, if that makes sense, because I really believe that as I slow down, you obviously have to slow down. You know, you're forced to slow down anyway. But to just retire. And as a symbol of what I'm talking about, think of your local McDonald's in the morning with a group of seniors that sits in the corner of every McDonald's in the United States and talks over the problems of the world over the bottomless cup of coffee. And I keep telling myself, I really don't want to join that group yet. Not until I really have to. And so a lot of it is fear. And I probably am forcing myself, perhaps more than I ought to be, because I don't want to give in to it, if that makes sense. I don't want to kind of admit that I am where I am in my career. And maybe part of it is I still dream about accomplishing some things that will be here after I go. Something that in my mind I can say I made tracks. I did something significant. I mattered. And the reality is this isn't just me. Everybody is dealing in one degree or one way or another with this. Some people go and seek counseling because they can't deal with it, because they're convinced that they don't matter. Think of some of the people that in some of these horrendous mass murders and shootings that we've seen in recent years. And what is it that these people are looking for? What is it that drives them to do this? And it seems to drive them with the idea that the only way I can matter is to take out more people than the people that have done this kind of thing before. It's frightening because it's a little bit sick. It's a little bit scary. But what I'm trying to suggest is there's substance and meaning to it. It's important. And one of the things that I think we cannot afford to ignore or to overlook in the conversations we've had about the changes that are happening in our economy, especially the technological changes. We talked about coding, and we talked about the most lucrative income opportunities in today's world seem to be in the area of those with the kinds of technological skills that they need. And we talked about We talked about the article about how to get a job at Google that Tom Friedman wrote, and we've talked about a number of things which suggest that. And so increasingly, more and more of us are being left behind. And one of the things that we shared was a finding in the book called The Second Machine Age, that it's becoming very obvious that many of the jobs that are disappearing in today's world will never come back. We are experiencing a significant, because capitalism by definition has always eliminated jobs, but that elimination of jobs has been more than compensated for by the creation of new jobs as the economy changes and expands and grows. The problem is now that the skills needed to be successful in these new jobs are so sophisticated that fewer and fewer people have much chance. So consequently, when they lose their jobs, they're finding it almost impossible to secure different jobs with anything near the income level that they lost. Many of them are moving into the service sector. They're moving into healthcare and restaurant work and hotel work and those kinds of things. In other words, they're finding themselves moving into that sector of the economy where they end up waiting upon and serving the people who do have the skills and are receiving the income. And so increasingly we seem to be developing into a clearly tiered class-based society more than we ever were before. And it's revealed in the salary levels, in incomes. It's revealed in the statistics indicating the degree of inequality that exists in American society today. The United States economy is experiencing more inequality than any other developed industrial or developed economy in today's world, where fewer and fewer are securing control over more and more of the wealth and income, and more find themselves falling out of the competitive race, so to speak. And the question that is raised in the second machine age is, what are we going to do as a society when it's very clear that we can't find work for these people, that there just aren't enough jobs, that technology is taking over and doing a lot of the things that we used to look to people to perform? Robots are taking over. Computers are taking over. Jobs that used to require hundreds of employees now require 10, for example. I know, for example, in the coal mines here in West Virginia, as an example, around 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected president, there were about 125,000 jobs in coal in southern West Virginia. The last number I saw, which was within the last 6 months, is something in the area of 16,000 jobs in coal. So what that means is 114,000 jobs have disappeared since 1980 in coal. And of course, the coal industry is doing everything that it can to pin the job loss on the Obama administration. But the fact of the matter is, it's technology employed by the coal companies themselves that eliminated most of these jobs. And I think people that really took time to understand and think and reflect a little bit will recognize that. But the danger is that in our society, in our modern developed society, most of us are defined as people by what we do. Most of us, our worth as human beings is measured by the job we perform, by the income level that job generates. What are we going to do psychologically for the increasing number of people for whom there isn't work? And again, we talk about all the time about the percentage, the numbers of people that are finding ways to get on the dole, so to speak, that are finding ways to qualify for workman's comp, of disability, SSI, Social Security, disability, and those kinds of things. And we wonder about those people because they don't seem to have the same kind of drive or needs that the rest of us have. We need to feel fulfilled. We need to feel independent. We need to feel self-supporting. We need to feel that we matter, that we're worth something, that we're contributing something to somebody. And over time, as capitalism has developed in America, and I think this is one of the most underappreciated, under-researched themes in the last couple of hundred years, and that is the impact that the Industrial Revolution is having on individual people, has had on individual people, and the impact that technology and technological growth is having on individual people. It's making human beings feel irrelevant and unimportant and meaningless. And this in a society where people's meaning and sense of worth has traditionally revolved around the job they do. And now a point where society can't produce those jobs anymore. And there's a competitive race to develop the skills to become competitive for the top jobs. But the fact of the matter is more and more of us are finding that we can't compete for those. And we're being rendered insignificant in terms of the economy. In fact, we're being told that the most important role we play within the economy is the fact that we are consumers. But if we aren't working and we aren't able to lay our hands on the kind of income that allows us to be consumers, we don't even matter there. So what happens to us psychologically as a people, as a society? I think all of these are significant. And you may say to yourself, what does this have to do with a virtual center on the study of the U.S. Constitution and civic responsibility? I would, and hopefully at the end of the program today we can come back to this. But let me just say at the front end that one of the driving themes that the founders wrestled with all the time in the republic that they created was the idea of the sense of worth of the citizens in this society. One of the benefits, one of the important ingredients of the mass participation that's associated with Republican government is the sense that one feels important because one participates in the decisions which affect the lives of all of us. When we vote, we participate. We become part of the action. Our voice is listened to. The ballot box gives us an opportunity to express our point of view, to express an opinion, to tell people what our preferences are. And the economy that is developing in America, which is obviously free enterprise capitalism, is driven by the idea that human worth, individual worth, is grounded in the idea of individual freedom. Madison made the point in Federalist Number 10 that to do anything that tampers with individual freedom is a cure for the violence of factions, which is worse than the disease itself. What Madison is doing is saying that whatever our political system does, however it's constructed, the one thing we cannot tamper with is individual freedom. Because individual freedom is what makes life of pursuing the kinds of opportunities that are available in an open, free society. And the assumption is that our worth as human beings is at some point in time going to be measured by what advantages, what we're able to accomplish with the talents and the skills that we have and the things that we learn, but more than anything else, with the freedom that gives us the opportunity to make all of this happen. So the very structure of government that the founders created is in part driven by a recognition that citizen responsibility, civic responsibility in a republic like this one is critical. People's freedom to speak, freedom to assemble, freedom to offer their opinions, and freedom of the press. All of these things, religious freedom, believe whatever we choose to believe. All of these things are part of what makes us whole as human beings. So I would suggest to you that an examination of ways that we matter or don't matter and the mission of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Because at least in theory, we believe that the whole reason for this is so that the individual can reach his full human potential. And the structure of government created, at least in theory, was created with the idea of creating the kind of political, economic, and social environment which would allow individuals to reach their full potential and to flourish. I would suggest to you that I don't care how conservative you are, how liberal you are, how radical you are. I don't care if you lean left, right, far right. It doesn't. In this sense, it doesn't matter. There's absolutely no question that every one of us, whatever our political persuasion, believes that what makes this political system, this society, this nation worth supporting and worth struggling and worth fighting for and worth dying for is the potential that it offers people, all of us, my family, my kids, my friends, my colleagues. Every one of us benefits from being here. None of us would opt to be somewhere else if we are indeed driven by this desire to become all we can be. Those who seek to change this society seek to change it in order to make that vision more real for more people. Those who oppose change in society oppose change with the idea that it's better to protect the people that are making it now than to do things which are going to risk the whole ball of wax, changes where we don't know what the results are going to be. In other words, what they are basically saying is better to stick with what we know than to take a chance and gamble with what we don't know. But all of it revolves around the potential of the human being in the sense that we all matter. Roosevelt's New Nationalism speech talked about a redefined role for government as part of the progressive agenda. And Roosevelt's definition of New Nationalism, his definition of the square deal, government's principal responsibility was to manage society primarily in the interests of the public. In other words, the public interest was always to be the priority, not the personal interests of a few, but the common interests of the many. Government's job, Roosevelt believed, was to make it possible to create the kind of a society in which everybody would have the opportunity to be not what society called a success, but what they themselves believed constituted being a success. The theme that Roosevelt constantly emphasized over and over in his approach to new nationalism was the idea that government has a responsibility to manage society in such a way that everybody has the maximum opportunity to give back to the community, to the general welfare. The reason that government has the right to regulate the hours of work, for example, and working conditions, and make sure that employees are not overworked 5, 6, and 7 days a week, 12 and 16 hours a day, is because government has a responsibility to make sure that these people have enough left to make a meaningful contribution to the good of the whole. That's what corporations are supposed to do. The reason we give the benefits that we do to corporations is because their success theoretically will be plowed back into the society as a whole, and all of us will benefit from the success of the few, and some of us will benefit, will be able to contribute to that success more than others. But everybody will contribute. Every working person, Roosevelt believed, has something to contribute to the common good. And government's job is to manage the economy in such a way that the opportunities for every individual to contribute to the public good is maximized. Where did all this, I've been going now for 40 minutes. All of this is spurred by this wonderful article that appeared in the New York Times this week. And the title of it, of course, which the title of it is a little bit non-revealing. What would Plato tweet is the title. The author of the article is Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein. Rebecca Goldstein. Let me give you a little bit about her. She is the author of a book entitled Plato at the Googleplex, Why Philosophy Won't Go Away. She's a philosopher. And she wrote this article, which I think is incredibly provocative, and it really stimulated much of the things that I've already mentioned. And that's what I would really like to devote the bulk of our program to today. It's the last program of our week, and I can't think of anything to leave the virtual center with and have 3 or 4 days to reflect before we come back together again than on a program, than on a theme like this. On why we matter, how we matter, what we can do to matter, what people in the past have tried to do in order to make sure that they matter. But the point that I tried to make in the first portion of this program is to suggest how psychologically important it is for all of us to matter, and some of the extreme things we do in order to make that point, that we indeed do matter. Let me share with you some of the details of this article. The first part of this is so real, all of us can relate to it. She says that this whole issue began when a writer friend asked her what her clout score was. Clout, K-L-O-U-T, not C-L-O-U-T, but K-L-O-U-T. What her clout score was. She says, we were sitting at a sushi bar in a Japanese restaurant, the master chef assembling edible origami and torched fish in foam. My husband and I, she said, used to patronize this neighborhood place quite a lot, until a restaurant critic ruined it for us by his unrestrained rave, so that now you have to make reservations months in advance to get in there. But my friend had magically procured us 2 seats just like that. And when I asked him for the secret of his influence, he responded by asking me about my clout score. I didn't know what a clout score was, she says, but I was pretty sure that I didn't have one. And yes, under his raised eyebrow questioning, it was revealed that since I didn't use Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media by which a website called Clout calculates your online influence, my score was probably low to non-existent. So your Clout score is a specific website that calculates your online influence. How many people look at what you say online? How many people tune in and respond to your tweets? And you know, when you Twitter. I'm using these words like I knew what I was talking about. When I Twitter, I shake, but that's another matter. Perhaps, the author says, studying the ancient Greeks might give me some perspective on today's social media obsession with clout. How much you matter online. On either side of us, she said, in the restaurant, diners were pointing their cell phones at their plates, taking pictures to be posted on their Facebook pages or Instagram accounts. I knew that's what they were doing. People have taken to putting themselves out there in all kinds of ways, producing in words, pictures, videos, the shared stories of their lives as they are transpiring. Let me pause for a moment here. The shared stories of their lives as they are transpiring. Taking the picture of the food in your plate at an exclusive restaurant that requires several months' reservations in order to get seated. And putting those pictures of the food in one of New York's most elegant restaurants on your Facebook page. What's going on here? What is it you are trying to say? You are obviously trying to say that here I am sitting in this exclusive place which many people will never see because they can't get in, and I'm here, and to prove it, here's a picture of what I'm eating. I matter. And I want everybody that I correspond with on Twitter or Facebook or whatever other media I use to know that I matter. And here's my proof. Think of the Academy Awards program. When Ellen DeGeneres did the self-portrait, if you will, the picture with Meryl Streep, and suddenly everybody crowds around, and there's this, and of course it wasn't within an hour in the Academy Awards show that she was able to announce that the audience for that photograph on Twitter was reaching millions of people. It broke records for the number of people that saw that photograph, that selfie. What is it that people are saying when they take self-portraits and put it on their Facebook page or send it to their friends as an attachment to an email or whatever else they might do? They are sharing stories of their lives as they are transpiring. This is my life as it's happening. This is not what Aristotle called the examined life. There's no effort here to reflect on what's happening in your life in order to select the most meaningful, the most significant portions of that life and send them out. The assumption is here that life as it's being lived is something that other people will care about and will respond to. If you look at it the wrong way, it seems to suggest a level of arrogance that's a little bit incredible. They disseminate their thoughts and deeds, large and small, sometimes very small, in what can seem like a perpetual plea for attention. I wasn't that out of touch that I didn't know about the large cultural changes that have overtaken our society while my attention was being directed elsewhere. And that elsewhere was ancient Greece. But what she's saying is, what are people doing out there on Facebook? How many people have gotten into problems because of what they put on their Facebook accounts? How many hackers are hacking into their bank accounts and credit card PIN numbers and all of these other things because of information that they're inadvertently sharing with the world because it's so important for them to matter. One of the most incredible examples of mattering, one of the members of my senior citizens class on Tuesday said if there was one play that symbolized the essence of American culture and American society, it would be Death of a Salesman. And the efforts of Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman to assert the fact that he mattered. In Act 2, Willie Loman makes the following comment: "You can't eat the orange and throw the peel away. A man's not a piece of fruit." In Act 1, Willie Loman's wife, Linda, talking about her husband, Willie, says, "I don't say he's a great man. Willie Loman never made a lot of money. His name was never in the paper. He's not the finest character that ever lived. But he's a human being. And a terrible thing is happening to him. So attention must be paid. Not to be able to fall in love like an old dog. Attention must finally be paid to such a person." In Act 2, there's a conversation between Willie and his son, Biff. And Biff says, "Pop, I'm a dime a dozen, and so are you." And Willie says, "I am not a dime a dozen. I'm Willie Loman, and you're Biff Loman." And later on in Act 2, Willie says, "I've got to get some seeds. I've got to get some seeds right away. Nothing's planted. I don't have anything in the ground. I got to leave something. People need to know I was here and that I matter." And what the author of this article in the Stone is pointing out, that people are using contemporary technology and are using the social media in order to make their mark on the world around them. And so suddenly a measure of that becomes their clout score. My heavens. It is wonderful. It's 54 minutes after the hour. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left before we pause for our break at the top of the hour. One of the contemporary poets that all of us are familiar with is Neil Diamond. I tend to be a real fan of Neil Diamond, as I think you probably will be able to tell. One of the most moving pieces of music that Neil Diamond ever wrote and recorded was a piece called "I Am, I Say." I am, I say. And in the middle, I am, I cried. In the last couple of minutes of this first hour, please listen to the words of that song. Thank you, Bob Kincaid, and welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution and Civic Responsibility. This is our second hour, and if you're just tuning in, welcome. You were greeted today by the piece called B, written by Neil Diamond, which is the lead song and the score for the movie Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And what we are looking at today is the whole idea of creating a situation in the world where all of us can feel that we matter, that we count. And all of us try to, as the expression is frequently used, leave tracks so that people will know we were here after we're gone. And there was a piece in this weekend's New York Times under the series called The Stone, which is a series on philosophy, which dealt with just this issue, and we started to look at that particular piece. And the author is Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein, who is a philosopher who has the title of her article is "What Would Plato Tweet?" And what she's basically doing is taking us and merging her focus on the ancient Greeks with our obsession through Facebook and these other things to be seen and heard so that people will know we're here and we matter, and the idea of sharing life as it's happening to us so that all of our friends can see. And one example we were using was the Ellen DeGeneres selfie at the Academy Awards with Meryl Streep that ended up with, being a self-photograph that went all over the world for Twitter, and it broke all sorts of records. And suddenly it becomes very, very important for what it symbolizes. A priority throughout the world is what it symbolizes, and I think that's what we're talking about here today at the Virtual Center. I would love to hear from you. Our phones are down, but my email works, and I would love to hear from you at waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien906@gmail.com. And what this article is talking about is ancient Greece. And so I'm going to focus a little bit more on the article during this hour, because what she's talking about is the similarities between what she saw in the sushi restaurant with people taking photographs of the food that were being served in this exclusive restaurant and then posting them on their Facebook page so that the entire world would know that they were there and know what they were eating as evidence that they were there and they matter and they count, and they're in a restaurant which is very, very difficult to get reservations for, and all of it. And she said, I wasn't that out of touch that I didn't know about the large cultural changes that were overtaking our society, while my attention was directed elsewhere, and that elsewhere was ancient Greece. And then she goes a little bit into her own research. And she says the following: for the past few years, I've been obsessed with trying to figure out what lay behind the spectacular achievements that had occurred there, ancient Greece. In a mere couple of centuries, Greek speakers went from anonymity and illiteracy, anonymity and illiteracy, lacking even an alphabet, to Aeschylus and Aristotle. They invented not only the discipline of philosophy, but also science, mathematics, the study of history, as opposed to mere chronicles of history. In other words, the study of history rather than merely telling what happened, or as some people facetiously say, one damn thing after another. And that special form of government they call democracy, literally rule of the people, though, as she admits, it goes without saying that the people didn't include women and slaves. They also produced timeless art, architecture, poetry, and drama. What lay behind the explosive ambition and achievement? I always planned eventually to catch up on the changes that were going on all around me once I'd gotten the ancient Greeks out of my system. Only now did it occur to me that I might be able to arrive at some contemporary perspective precisely because I hadn't gotten the Greeks out of my system. Parallels between their extraordinary time and our extraordinary time were suddenly making themselves felt. In other words, she began to see the similarities between what the ancient Greeks were about and what people are about today in sushi restaurants with cell phones that take pictures of the food they're being served for posting on their Facebook page or on Twitter accounts or whatever. So now she's going into a little bit about the ancient Greeks and the way they looked at this issue. For starters, she said, the clout on which my friend prided himself struck me as markedly similar to what the Greeks called kleos, K-L-E-O-S, kleos. The word comes from the old Homeric word for I hear, and it meant a kind of auditory renown. Think about I hear. In other words, I've heard of you, I know you, I know about you. A kind of auditory renown. Vulgarly speaking, it was fame. But it also could mean the glorious deed that merited the fame. In other words, not just the fame itself, but what you did to earn the fame, as well as the poem that sang of the deed and so produced the fame. The medium, the message, and the impact all merged into one shining concept called kleos. So kleos is an amorphic term that kind of means fame, but not just the fame itself, but the activity or the deed that produced the fame, and the poem or the song or the story or the written word or whatever it is that praises the deed and produces the fame. And I'm thinking if any of you recall or have seen and know about Greek drama, one of the most important things in Greek drama is the chorus. The group of people in the background who sing the poems and sing of the events that are happening on stage. And the play and the poems and the songs are all written in order to celebrate the deed that's happening on stage. It's almost like the score at an opera. Kleos, she says, lay very near the core of the Greek value system. Their value system was at least partly motivated, as perhaps all value systems are partly motivated, by the human need to feel as if our lives matter. A little perspective, which the Greeks certainly had, reveals what brief and feeble things our lives are. As the old Jewish joke has it, the food here is terrible, and such small portions. What can we do to give our lives a moreness? What a beautiful word, a moreness, that will help withstand the eons of time that will soon cover us over, blotting out the fact that we ever existed at all. Really, why did we bother to show up for our existence in the first place? The Greek speakers were as obsessed with this question as we are. So what we want, what we seek, is documentation that we matter. We're looking for a sense of moreness. The fact that there's something about us which causes us to be remembered by other people, whatever it might be. I think the Neil Diamond piece, I Am, I Say, which we used to close the first hour, is the idea of this person screaming out, I'm here, I matter. to an empty room, to an empty chair that can't respond. I'm here, I matter, I am, I cry. It's me, hey world, here I am. Damn it, notice me. And then, of course, I think the absolutely beautiful piece from Jonathan Livingston Seagull about B, which obviously adds a spiritual tone to this whole thing, about all of us were created to soar like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, to fly faster and higher than any seagull had ever been able to do before. All of us seek our own environment in which to soar. To have people look and point up at us and say, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's him, it's her. All of us need that. That's kleos. That's what the Greeks were about. Like us, the Greeks wanted to make their lives matter. And like a Twitter user, they did so by courting the attention of other people, other mortals. And like so many of us, I'm back into the article here, and like so many of us now, they approached this question secularly, not religiously, secularly. Despite their cultures being saturated with religious rituals, they had gods. We all know that. They didn't turn to their notoriously unreliable immortals for assurance that they mattered. They didn't really want immortal attention. Something terrible usually happened when they attracted the divine eye. If you've read Greek literature at all, you know that when the gods become active in your life, they play tricks on you. They do things to you. They cheat you. They steal from you. They humiliate you. They do all of these negative things. Because the gods are engaged in their own little world and they're using us for their entertainment. And so the Greeks didn't want the gods involved in their lives at all, because whenever the gods got involved in their lives, it usually meant trouble for them. That's what all those rituals were trying to prevent, was the fact that the gods would take an interest in them and intervene in their lives. Rather, what they wanted was the attention of other people, of other mortals. All that we can do to enlarge our lives, they concluded, is to strive to make of them things worth the telling, the stuff of stories that will make an impact on other mortal minds, so that, being replicated there, our lives will take on moreness. What the Greeks were about was trying to enlarge their lives in such a way that their lives became worth other people telling about, talking about, telling stories about. The stuff of stories that will make an impact on other people's minds. So that, being replicated there, in other words, every time the story about you is retold, your lives take on more significance. They become worth more. You matter more. And that's what the whole Greek value system was about. The more outstanding you were, the more mental replication of you there would be. And the more replication, the more you mattered. What a wonderful, wonderful statement. The more outstanding you were, the more mental replication of you there would be. And the more replication, the more you mattered. In a nutshell, that's what Greek culture is all about. My God, it's significant. But, as she points out, not everybody back then was approaching the question of what mattered, how you mattered, in mortal terms. Contemporaneous, at the same time that the Greeks were flourishing, right across the Mediterranean from them, was a still obscure tribe which called themselves the Ivrim, the Hebrews, apparently from their word for over, since they were over on the other side of the Jordan. And over there, they worked out their notion of a covenantal relationship with one of their tribal gods, whom they eventually elevated to the position of the one and only God, the master of the universe, providing the foundation for both the physical world without and the moral world within. So the Hebrews approached the whole issue, the whole question of how do I know that I matter, in a totally different way, not in a mortal way, but in a spiritual way. And what they did was to elevate one of their gods into the one and only God, the master of the universe. And therein lay the symmetry, the connection between the physical world we exist in and the moral world within us. From his position of remotest transcendence, this God, nevertheless, maintains a rapt interest in human concerns. This master of the universe, this one and only God, cares about us, maintains an interest in human concerns, harboring many intentions directed at us, his creations, who embody nothing less than his reasons for going to the trouble of creating the world from nothing. We are the human being is the essence of why the one and only God created the world. What we are and what we can do and what we can become and what we can accomplish. To the Hebrews, explains what God's plan for the creation of the world was all about. He takes us almost as seriously as we take us. Having your life replicated in his all-seeing, all-judging mind, terrifying as the thought might be, would certainly confer a significant quantity of moreness. The better we live our lives, the more our lives follow the plan and the purpose for which God created us in the first place, the more we matter in the eyes of God. So we measure how much we matter by looking at the relationship between us mortal beings and the Almighty. And those around us don't seem to play, at least in this perspective, don't seem to play the significant role that they do to the Greeks. From the Greeks' perspective, the only way to measure how much you matter is by measuring your impact on the world around you. The Hebrews' position shifts the emphasis from the world around you to the Creator who brought you into existence in the first place. And then, she says, there's a third approach to the problem of mattering, which also emerged in ancient Greece. It too was secular, approaching the problem in strictly mortal terms. So we're back to the Greeks. We've left the one and almighty God. We've left the Hebrews. Now we're back to the Greeks. We're back to measuring our moreness, the extent to which we matter. in mortal terms. I'm speaking about Greek philosophy, she says, which was Greek enough to buy into the kleos-like assumption that none of us are born into mattering, but rather have to achieve it, and that the achievement does indeed demand outsized ambition and effort, requiring you to make of yourself something extraordinary. And in the midst of that line, she includes the very famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Aristotle. The unexamined life is not worth living. So this is yet a third approach to the challenge of mattering. And the way we matter in this context, the way we become important, is to achieve important, achieve moreness or mattering. It does not come without what she calls an outsized ambition and effort. It requires that you make of yourself something extraordinary. You are what you do. You are what you become. You are what your impact on other people is. You don't matter because you are. You matter because of what you are able to do with what you are. But, she says, Greek philosophy also represented a departure from its own culture. Mattering wasn't acquired by gathering attention of any kind, mortal or immortal. That's not the way you matter, by attracting attention. Acquiring mattering was something people had to do for themselves, cultivating such virtuous qualities of character as justice and wisdom. They had to put their own souls in order. This demands hard work, since simply to understand the nature of justice and wisdom, which is the first order of business, taxes our limits, not to speak of then acting on our conclusions. And the effort may not win us any kleos at all. Socrates got himself a cup of hemlock. He drank it calmly, unperturbed by his own low ratings. So the third approach to the challenge of mattering is the way you live your life. Getting your own soul in order. Organizing your own priorities in the right way. Educating yourself so that you can appreciate the wonders of the world around you and the wonders of being alive. Being able to appreciate life and opportunity. Being able to appreciate those other people who are around us, who help make us what we are. Recognizing that if there's any accountability, it's within us to ourselves. We know what happiness is. Plato and Aristotle have told us in their writings what happiness is. Happiness is recognizing the proper order of things. Getting your priorities in order, getting your ducks in a row, so to speak. And recognizing the value of things like justice and wisdom. To the point that you are comfortable with the fact that you have become the best that you can be. As she says, it may not get you any clout. Socrates ended up drinking hemlock. But if you've read The Death of Socrates, there's nothing there that indicates that for a second he doubted that what he was doing and what he did was right. And the fact that those around him couldn't appreciate that is their problem, not his problem. So your accountability, how much you matter, is answered by looking inward, looking internally at yourself. She says the divergent Greek and Hebrew approaches went into the mix that is Western culture, often clashing, but sometimes also tempering one another. Over the centuries, philosophy, perhaps aided by religion, learned to abandon entirely the flawed Greek presumption that only extraordinary lives matter. How does all this stuff feed into where we are? Well, one way, she says, philosophy, with a little bit of religion thrown in, enabled people to get beyond the Greek idea that only extraordinary lives matter and the rest of them didn't. This was philosophical progress, more subtle than the dazzling triumphs of science, but nevertheless real. Philosophy has laboriously put forth arguments that have ever widened the sphere of mattering. It was natural for the Greeks to exclude their women and their slaves, not to mention non-Greeks, those that they called barbarians. Their society was an exclusive one. In other words, the main theme was excluding people rather than including people. Those priorities in our world are unacceptable. She says such exclusions are unthinkable to us now. Being inertial creatures, we required vigorous and oft-repeated arguments that spearheaded social movements that resulted at long last in the once quixotic Declaration of Human Rights. A declaration that the world, the political system, the culture that we are in tells us that we all matter. Not just a few of us, not just the extraordinary ones, but damn it, all of us. We all matter. We've come a long way from the kleos of the Greeks, with its unexamined presumption that mattering is inequitably distributed amongst us, with the multi-replicated among us mattering more. We've come beyond that. We've moved beyond that. Obviously, we live in a society where a lot of people are still hung up on the fact that that matters. Those people that are worth the most and have the most influence and can get tickets to sold-out games or get priority tables at sold-out restaurants because of who they are. They go out of their way to convince us that this aspect of Greek culture hasn't changed. But we know that it has. And our Declaration of Independence tells us that we all matter. That we were endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. The right to be free, the right to be alive, the right to have opportunity, the right to have an equal chance, the right to be respected, and the right to be valued. the right to know that we matter. And a priority of our society must be to infuse in all of us not only the recognition that we matter, but the responsibility that we carry as citizens to let those around us know that they matter too. And the reciprocal relationship, the reciprocal idea of a social contract. If I want people to know I matter, then I have to be willing to let them know that they matter. Thus, just as we have moved beyond the Greeks and the idea that only the few who create extraordinary deeds matter, so also we have come to recognize that in our world, the way we measure how much we matter is in the world we live in the world around us, how we treat each other. Not in how much money we acquire, not in how much property we own, not on how much political influence we have, not on how much political influence we can buy, but what we are able to do to help those around us matter. Because in return, they will make us matter. We've come a long way from the kleos of the Greeks, with its unexamined presumption that mattering is inequitably distributed amongst us, with the unreplicated among us mattering more. Only, she says, sometimes it feels like we haven't. Our need is to feel as if our lives matter. Our need to feel as if our lives matter is, as always, unabating. It never ends. It's never satisfied. It's always there. But the variations on the theistic approach no longer satisfy on the scale they once did. While cultivating justice and wisdom is as difficult as it always has been. Our new technologies have stepped in just when we most need them. Kleos, or clout, is only a tweet away. The implication here is that technology is giving all of us an opportunity to matter, rather than a threat. It can be a tool to work to our benefit. She says it's stunning that our culture has, with the dwindling of theism, returned to the answer to the problem of mattering that Socrates and Plato judged woefully inadequate. Perhaps their opposition is even more valid today. How satisfying in the end is a culture of social media obsession. The multi-replication so readily available is as short-lived and insubstantial as the many instances of our lives they replicate. Many of the things that we are putting on Facebook, and I'm struck by the stories about people sitting in the same room texting each other back and forth, and people constantly communicating what they're thinking, what they're wearing, what they're planning on doing, what they're thinking, what they want to be, what they were, what they have, what they want, everything. In other words, every thought they have is shared based on the assumption that the mere fact that they are alive is what makes their life meaningful, is what makes them matter. I personally feel that Aristotle is onto something when he talks about the examined life. The need for all of us to recognize what the real priorities are and getting our lives in order in such a way that our priorities are in line and we live in accordance with the way we believe we ought to live. And there's something psychological and internally that tells us if we do that, that we matter. I personally think. I'm very comfortable with that. But what this author is suggesting to us is that the social media technology, contemporary technology, is opening up an opportunity for all of us to find new ways to suggest or to indicate that we really do matter. Even though she acknowledges that the multi-replications that's so readily available now are as short-lived and insubstantial as the many instances of our lives that they replicate. In other words, it's hard to believe that our night at a restaurant, at a Japanese restaurant, eating sushi matters to anybody. But the way we define our priorities, to many of us it seems to. If the inadequacies of Kleos were what initially precipitated the emergence of philosophy, then maybe, she says, it's time for philosophy to take on clout. Philosophy has the resources. It's far more developed now than in the day when Socrates wandered the agora trying to prick holes in people's Kleos-inflated attitudes. It can start by demonstrating just as clearly and forcefully as it knows how that we all matter. What she's doing is laying out a challenge to philosophy, and that is to find a way to get in sync with the social media and what's happening in today's world with one clear end game in mind, and that is to give everybody an appreciation of the fact that we all matter. Mattering, none of us more than any other, is our birthright, she says. And we should all be treated accordingly, granted the resources that allow for our flourishing. All of us matter. None of us matter more than others. This is our birthright. This is what all men being born equal is all about. And all of us have a right to matter. And all of us have a right to be treated in ways which allow us the opportunity to show that we matter. And all of us have a right to access to the resources that will allow us to flourish, to blossom. Appreciating this ethical truth, she says, might help calm the frenzy surrounding our own personal mattering, allowing us to direct more energy towards cultivating justice and wisdom. In fact, fully appreciating this ethical truth in all its implications for both thought and deed would constitute a significant step towards the cultivation of justice and wisdom. What Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein is telling us here is that philosophy has a challenge before it. And that philosophy is to connect for all of us the world we live in with the individual need to matter that exists within all of us. Because we have progressed, we have come far beyond the Greek idea that mattering only applies to the few. We live in a society in which mattering applies to all of us. It is the society, it is the republic that our founders created. It is what the philosophy of the Declaration of Independence is all about. It is, at least in one sense, what Madison's emphasis on individual liberty and freedom is all about. Freedom is the principal resource that gives all of us an opportunity to matter. And increasingly, the way we matter is in the extent to which we can help other people to matter. And therein comes our recognition that to others we matter. And thus we kind of come full circle to the idea of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We've got about 9 minutes left in our program today. I would like to ask you to think about all the language and all the literature that we read and hear related to the idea of American exceptionalism. I would suggest to you that this is American exceptionalism. What makes this republic exceptional is not where it's been, but where it can go. Not what it's done, but what it has the opportunity to do. Not for the opportunities that it's given the few, but for the opportunities that it can give the many. And there's no question that one of the principal ways we make that happen is to recognize that how much we matter is directly related to how much other people matter to us. We need to care about each other. We need to put an emphasis on how we treat each other. We need to recognize the realities that how we are treated is going to be determined directly by how we treat others. We have been handed by the founders a republic which is based on the philosophy that all of us can matter. And all of us have the responsibility to do everything we can to help other people matter as well. It doesn't deny the existence of the Almighty. It doesn't deny the importance that individual ones of us relate to the old Hebrew idea that what really matters, how much I matter, is a relationship between me and my God. There's nothing in that that conflicts or contradicts with a way of life which suggests that other people measure how much you matter by the way you treat them. And the way you are treated by them is a direct function of how you treat them. There's nothing inconsistent between that and whatever relationship you have with your God or your gods or whatever. But what it suggests is a mission. The founders talked about a mission. John Winthrop talked about a mission. We will be as a city on the hill. We will reform the world by the way we live, by the extent to which we are able to create the kind of society that God wanted man to live in and to create. We have a mission. Our founders gave us a mission. And that mission is to so organize and manage and run our society that to the full extent possible, finding ways to make sure that in this society everybody matters is a number one priority. You do not measure how much people matter or don't matter by where they live, or how much they own, or what they drive, or what they wear, or the clubs they belong to, or the restaurants they eat in. The way you measure how much you matter is in the signs and the symbols and the response that you get from other people. They tell you how much you matter. And that is a function of how much you believe that they matter. The reason that this nation, that this republic that the founders gave us is exceptional, is not because of where we've been, but where we have the opportunity to go. We have an opportunity that no other people in the history of the world has been given, which is an opportunity to make real a society in which everybody matters. Clearly, there's much more to it than the job you hold, or the income you receive, or what you drive, or what you wear, where you live, and all the rest of it. Where you go to school, where your kids go to school. All of that is a divergence. Most of us know what would be most directly involved in helping other people to matter. It's respect. It's love. It's a recognition that other people not only have rights, but have rights which you must respect. Not rights that other people should respect, other rights that you have a responsibility to respect. No other nation in the history of the world has been given the opportunities to make this idea of mattering real more than we do. It is very important to recognize then that what makes America exceptional is not where we've been, but where we have the opportunity to go. All of us, in our own way, whether it's in the popularity of Neil Diamond's music, whether it's in the pleas and the screams of Willie Loman, whether it's the horrendous acts to get attention that people commit in our society. All of it suggests that we still are encumbered, confronted with what seems at times to be a very warped sense of what really goes into mattering. American exceptionalism will be fully realized when not just a few of us, but all of us, begin to appreciate the importance of people mattering and what that means in terms of not only opportunities for us, but responsibilities imposed upon us. If you believe they are responsibilities that come from God, from Almighty God, fine. If you believe that, as the Greeks did, that these responsibilities are internal, that they are all reflections of getting your own soul in order, fine. But there's no question that the founders gave us the political structure and the value system which made it possible for us to find our way. Find a way to make a society real. A society that respected the fact that everybody matters. I think that this may be, in many ways, the most important message that we can get in something called the Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution and Civic Responsibility. A key ingredient of that civic responsibility is recognizing that not only I matter, but that you matter too. We are at 58 minutes after the hour, and I know Bob Kincaid is getting ready to begin his program in a couple of minutes. I want to thank you for your willingness to stay with us, if you are with us indeed from the beginning. I encourage you to reflect on these things because I think there's a lot here. This is our last program this week, so you have 3 or 4 days to reflect. We will get together the first day of next week. I look forward to it. Please take care of yourself. Be safe. We want to basically have you back here at the Virtual Center. I'm Bill O'Brien. Thank you so very much.